What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
And my name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive. And we are in week three. Three?
More than that.
4?
Yeah, at least 4. Yeah, because this is the fifth one.
Of our series, this out of the shadows into the light.
Right. Yeah.
And this sermon we're talking about is called Now I See.
Right.
So it should be a fun one, I think. We're talking about the story of the blind man.
Story of the blind man.
Yep.
It's a fantastic story. Lots of parts to it. Lots of things that we can get into on it. So it's going to be a good one. Let's do it.
Let's jump in. All right, Dave. Well, we're back. We're here. And I feel like in the last week, a lot has happened sports-wise. And not that we are a sports podcast by any means, but how on a scale of 1 to like 10, how fast did your bracket get busted?
Within the first hour.
Yeah, gosh, man. If you say you have a perfect bracket out there, you're wrong. There's not one. I think ESPN even put out that like out of the however million they had, that there was 0 perfect brackets listed on their site.
It's always crazy, and it's always like there were like a lot of 13. Why is it always 13 and 4? I mean,
the upsets, you mean?
Yeah, the upsets. Yeah, that's where they would be. But like 16. I mean,
yeah, 16.
Was it Finley Dickinson?
Yep.
Man, that's crazy stuff.
It was.
Princeton's in the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
it's been fun from a spectator perspective, and it makes me like, man, I wish other sports did something like this. Even watching the World Baseball Classic, how it's been a pretty quick tournament overall, but these single elimination games, like, there's something fun about it because you just don't know. Like, everything's one pitch, one hit, or...
Yeah. The other big thing is Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso. Sorry, I have not watched it.
I haven't watched it yet. All right, I won't spoil it.
Please don't.
Yeah, I'm trying to savor. This is the last season. I'm trying to savor them as I go through. Because I already kind of have this sadness. There's only like 9 or 10 episodes left. And
I know you get into like show holes when such good shows just kind of end.
Yeah. So, we better jump into this today. So, this is such a great story. And first of all, I just got to say kudos to our drama team. They did a fantastic. I know you had to step out.
I did, but
they did a fantastic job, and it was interactive. The congregation was playing a role in it, and
nice.
So we had to close our eyes for a while to be the blind man, and then we got healed. And so, it was a great thing. But the title is Now I See. And so let me start with this, Nick, and I'll put this up so y'all can see it too. This is one of the first images I put up in the sermon Sunday. And what do you see?
I see 2 people looking at each other.
Okay, that's what you see first.
Yes, that's the first thing I see.
Yeah, and some people see a vase first.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, but it can be, a vase and it's a fairly, this is not an unpopular little illustration. You probably have seen it before at some point. And it illustrates whether you're looking at the foreground or the background, you see 2 different things. And so I guess my point that I began with on Sunday was, what if a person could only see it one way and just insisted just to the death that it was, a vase or two things. And that's the way it had to be, and you're wrong.
So kind of like the dress ordeal a few years ago. Do you remember that?
Oh, gosh, yeah.
The white and gold and the black and blue.
Man, we should have had this conversation. That would have been a great one to say, what do you see? Yeah, is it gold or blue or whatever it was?
I think I always saw gold and white, I think is what it was.
Yeah, but that kind of thing. And so, those are fun things, but when it becomes to sort of like our religious convictions sometimes, just having this narrow focus, this is the only way that it can be. And so that's kind of where the story begins. There is this man that is blind from birth. He's begging there, outside the city somewhere. And Jesus' disciples come by, and the disciples, because they can only see it as what they've been told, they ask Jesus this question: who sinned that this man was born blind? Was it him, or was it his parents? Because that's the only way that they can see it.
Right.
And so Jesus turns it on his head and says, neither sinned that he did that he was born this way. And so then we have, from that point on, sort of this progression through this story of the blind man being healed and people's reaction to it. And it's so interesting, and why it fits so well into this series of Out of the Shadows into the Light. There's a man who's literally come out of darkness, spiritual blindness. But the more you go through, this man born blind becomes not just physically sighted, he becomes spiritually sighted as well. Yeah. And those who should have been, able to see and have spiritual sight become more and more blind. And so they take the blind man after he's healed. He goes down to the pool of Siloam, washes, and he can see. And so they take him to the priest, to the Pharisees, yeah. And they kind of put him on trial there, and they said, what's going on here? And he says, well, who was this man who healed you? And he says, so this time we're seeing this progression. The blind man says, well, I don't know. I guess maybe he's a prophet.
Yeah.
He doesn't know. He hasn't even seen Jesus with his eyes. He's talked to him. And so, but they can't get over the fact that this happened on the Sabbath. Right. Here on the Sabbath. So Jesus must be sinful. Even though he performed this miracle, he must be sinful.
Yeah.
Because
he worked on the Sabbath.
On the Sabbath. And so they try to get to the bottom of this. Who was it that did this? And so they bring in his parents, and his parents are kind of fearful because these people in authority, spiritual authority, are kind of, tell us about your son. What happened here?
Yeah.
They said, we don't know. All we can tell you is that he was our son. He was blind, and now he can see. And ask him because he's an adult.
Yeah, this is stuff that doesn't happen. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so I can imagine just all this going on, and like everybody's trying to put these collective detective pieces together to go, how did this happen? And everybody's like, it just happened. Like, I can't imagine being blind and then all of a sudden seeing everything for the first time.
Right.
I don't know if you ever, I don't want to get too far off here, but I don't know if you ever seen those videos of like those Google glasses that help people see color for the first time,
right?
Who have, been colorblind, and just watching those people interact with, like, when they see color, it's always like, they always have such an amazing, like, oh my gosh, this is what the world looks like. And to imagine that from a blind spot, but then trying to have to explain this to somebody else, you're like, I don't know, everything was black and then it was colorful.
Right. Or I've seen some really precious videos of children who have had ear implants, and they hear their parents' voices for the first time, and just the joy that comes over their face. So these are beautiful, wonderful things that happens, and these religious professionals intent on making it a bad thing, a sinful thing. Is just craziness.
Trying to catch somebody in the act of doing something wrong.
Right. So they bring him back in, and and they grill him some more. And he says, "Look, I already told you." He says, I don't know who he was. All I know is I once was blind. Now I see."
Yeah.
Familiar words?
Yep.
That's where they come from. Amazing grace. And so, and so they call him a sinner. You were born blind. So they're just like the disciples were first, You're obviously you were born in sin. How dare you lecture us?
Right.
Where the religious professions.
Now, is this where the mindset starts? Like, is this the beginning of where that mindset started to shift of like your circumstances were because of sin versus like sometimes life just happens? Or does that make sense?
Yeah, I think Jesus turned that on his head and undid that. I think you see that some with the Apostle Paul, with some of the things, although Paul could be Paul struggled with that as well.
Yeah.
But Paul had a thorn in the flesh that he prayed to get rid of, and he never did. So, I do think you begin to see that a little bit, although I will say we still have that, and this is the other thing I want to talk about, we still have these blind spots of what our assumptions about something is.
Yeah.
You know what the problem with blind spots are?
What? You can't see them?
You can't see them. You can't see them. We all have them. And, we may think we don't. We may insist that we are fully sighted, that we see well, but we all have blind spots. And, it's not just driving down the road. There may be things that, I may do something that's very annoying and I don't see it, and everybody else knows about it.
Right.
But, it's just hard for me to see. But there also, I think when it comes to some of our religious convictions and traditions, that we just feel like it has to be this way. I talked a little bit about confirmation bias on Sunday as well, because I think you're really seeing it illustrated in these religious professionals. They have confirmation bias. They've already decided that Jesus is evil, that Jesus is a sinner, and so anything he does is bad and evil. And so they're taking that confirmation bias and trying to make this beautiful story into a bad story.
And if all you're doing is looking for bad, you're going to find something,
right?
You know, like, or you're going to perceive something as bad.
Yeah, I mean, if confirmation bias is a new term for you, it probably is, and I think it's thrown out a lot now, but, you know, we see it all the time.
Yeah.
Right. You know,
like a sports commentator who might be like overly like excited about the one team they cover versus trying to be, you know,
neutral. Well, and I wonder, because I hear like Vin Scully is one that gets a lot, or Tim McCarver too.
Yeah.
I remember like everybody said like, you know, Tim McCarver is against the Braves and all that stuff. And like, I really wondered if you didn't have a dog in the fight, if you would see it that way. But he's probably got confirmation bias too.
Yeah.
But is he more objective than it seems? Also, like when you're watching a sporting event like a, you know, baseball or a football, and the refs or the umpires, you know, it's always like if something happens, you know, it's the umpires picking on your team or you know, whatever. You know, I've seen it myself, and like watching, you know, Georgia, a team I'm pulling for, and there's a, you know, pass thrown, and you know, maybe there's a penalty or not a penalty, and it's like depending on your perspective, is like that was pass interference.
Yeah.
You know, but if it's on your side, it's still like, oh no, that was
a great play.
Let's go for the ball. So yeah,
and turn around everything.
So we all have it, and I guess that's what I want to say is we all struggle with it, but it's just so played out in this story of not being able to see what Jesus is doing because we've decided that's not the way the world works. That's not the way the world works. That's not how God works. You know, he healed on the Sabbath. You know, he speaks truth to us, and we don't like it. So we're going to make him a bad person.
Basically, yeah. I mean, I've heard people use it in terms of like, you ever heard the phrase like putting Jesus in a box? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like we put him by our own self-defined rules of like, this is how you can interact in this world with us, Jesus, as opposed to us.
We decided we attributed. Like I heard this one theologian say one time that he is trying to interpret America biblically, not trying to interpret the Bible Americanly or from America's perspective. Does that make sense? It's like we come into it with our own preconceived Western notions of how God is, how Jesus works, you know, how these stories in the Bible are. And so, you know, our context in where we live, you know, plays into it. And I think we have to lose that, or at least hold on to it loosely, that we might not know everything, that we might have something that we could grow in. And so, you know, so we watch this play out in the rest of the story where, you know, they get really mad because he basically says, they keep asking him over and over again. They just can't seem to get it. You know, what happened to you? Who's healed you?
You didn't see the guy who healed you?
Yeah. Like who was this? And, you know, he says, you know, I don't know. You know, I told you I was blind. Now I see. Why do you keep asking me? And he says this some kind of sarcastic thing. He says, do you want to be his disciples too? And so that really got next to them when he said that. Do you want to be his disciples too? And so that's the point. They just, you know, threw him out and said, you know, you were born in sin. And so at this point, Jesus shows back up in the story. Yeah. And now it's the first time that he's actually seen Jesus. And so Jesus comes and they have this conversation, and he confesses him as Messiah. And then the Pharisees are close by, or the religious professionals on the scene there. And they have this little confrontation with Jesus. And Jesus says this, let me read it off my outline here if I can. Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. So that's a tough verse. for those of us, particularly inside the church, those of us who may be pretty steadfast in some theology or doctrine or tradition that we might hold to very tightly.
Right.
And I use the illustration on Sunday. It's like we have built our faith out of these bricks, this brick wall, and we feel like, well, if we pull this one thing out, it's all going to come toppling down.
Right.
There's this fear and like, what if this isn't true, or if I was mistaken with this, what else does it mean? And I think that can be a very dangerous place to be. I think Jesus says as much here. To think that we have the full story and the understanding. And I'm not saying not to have belief.
Yeah.
We affirm our faith with the Apostles' Creed. There are things that we hold dear, but even how we interpret or think about that, I think we need to hold lightly with open hands to realize that maybe we don't, or either maybe God may be doing a new thing, or do something new and different, or show us a different way of looking at it. A different way of looking at it. Where wait, no.
Yeah,
you can
there's
look
a
at
base there.
You can look at it both ways, right?
Yeah.
It can be both. So does that make sense?
It does. And I'm kind of just sitting here kind of reflecting, and, I think a lot of times we feel like we have to have the full picture of God to fully trust or believe or whatever. But sometimes I think we kind of look at what we feel like we understand, and every time something comes up that maybe changes our perspective on it just a little bit or whatever, sometimes it doesn't lead us into an unhealthy place of trying to put the other pieces together, but it also can lead to a place of like understanding, like, oh, this brick over here that I kind of got now makes a lot more sense. So I think it's even perspective of how we're using it, because if we think that one brick that we might not have all the answers for is the one and only way things can be, I think that's where we can get in trouble. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, right? Is that like this one brick here, just because you might have gotten a little wrong doesn't mean everything else is
right. Or it may be like that we're using the wrong metaphor to approach our faith. We kind of engineered our faith with these cogs that sort of fit together and got to turn together. And it may be that approaching it from a more organic, growing perspective.
Yeah.
That we're growing in our knowledge, and that there's seeds that have been planted and they're growing. And, you see that through, I think, your life, your physical life, as you grow. I mean, things that we know now as adults that we didn't know when we were children. We might have an understanding of, why the wind blows, and that grows and changes, or, I don't know, that was probably a bad example, but you get the idea that we grow in our wisdom and experience of life, and in the same way that it's like we've talked about that in here before, that reading these stories, we might have read them 100 times, 1,000 times, but yet something happens and we see it in a little bit different light because we have now had an experience, or we've learned a different, or we read another verse that made this verse come alive.
Yep.
And so I think it's just all kind of this growing journey.
Yeah, that idea of view and perspective changing. Do you want to do a little exercise with me real quick?
Sure.
So take a finger.
Okay.
All right. Now look up in the sky, and now I want you to just point straight up. And now I want you to draw, here, I'm going to talk more in the mic so you guys can hear me too, so we don't look too crazy. I want you to draw a circle clockwise, and just keep drawing that circle clockwise.
Clockwise.
Clockwise, yep.
All right.
Now, I want you to slowly bring it down, doing the same thing below your eyes. Now, why are you going counterclockwise?
Yeah.
Like, we see it as one thing, but all of a sudden, like, when you get a different perspective, like, it's just different, and
what is this magic?
What is this wizardry that I just pulled on you there? Which I found that I was at a youth conference, and there was nothing funnier than watching like 4,000 people do this all at once, and they're all like, wait, what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it really was a good illustration of perspective and really trying to understand like how God views things, because he's got that top where we're kind of looking up at God going, well, this is how I understand it. He's like, well, this is how I see it, or this is how I come to.
I like that. I mean, and to be fair, the people of Jesus's day that might have looked at somebody had to have sinned.
Yeah.
Because this bad thing has happened. He's been born blind. It could have been the parents, could have been him, And so we tried to make sense of the world that we know, but there's so much of the world that we don't know.
Yeah.
And so we take every available piece of information that we have to try to make faith or to make a worldview, and then something happens to change that. I've often used the example of Galileo, and Galileo taking a microscope and realizing that the world, because up to that point they thought that we had this geocentric view of the universe, and the Earth stayed still, and everything else revolved around it. And so that's the way. And they weren't so primitive. They thought about the world being flat. Oh no, that was old fashioned. But at first they did. They had grown to this point, and so they, it's interesting that it was the religious professionals that were trying to burn him at the stake if Galileo did not recant and say that we had a geocentric view of the universe. We're going with stuff that we know, and our knowledge of things as a society, but also I think as individuals, and just to be open to that, because we might miss seeing Jesus. The religious professionals who you had thought should have been able to see Jesus.
They should have been maybe the grace-filled ones.
They had studied Scripture. They knew the Messiah was coming. They should have seen some of the signs of that.
Yeah. But
they could not get past this one thing. He healed on the Sabbath, and he ate with sinners, and he talked to Samaritans, and he did all those things.
Honestly, as a person who's been on church staff for 17 plus, one of my biggest fears has always been that like somehow like a reincarnate Jesus would show up,
right?
And that I wouldn't recognize. Like that's always been a fear in the back of my head. Like, not that I don't study enough or whatever, but it's just like, what if I don't see it?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I've heard people say that, like, if Jesus showed up at our church, how would we receive him?
Yeah.
What would our judgment be about him?
Will you fill out the Connect card?
We'll fill out the Connect card, or just the things that he would say, the people that he would associate with, or some of the practices, because Jesus said, "I haven't come to condemn the law, but to fulfill the law." But yet he turned it on its head.
Upside down.
Turned a lot of stuff upside down, and so that was one thing that he was doing. That Jesus cared more about people. The law was there for us, but not the other way around, us for the law. And so, some of the long-held, things that have sort of evolved into these steadfast traditions, he came and, Sarah, our youth pastor, had a shirt on today. It says, "Don't try to sit at the tables that Jesus turned over." I like that, because we will try to pull those back up and sit back down at us, when he upsets the status quo.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. It's true. Well, this has been an awesome time, and I think as we consider our perspective and stuff like that, is I think one of the things that we would just mostly encourage is to just remain open to what God's trying to continuously teach us today.
Yeah.
Don't be so steadfast that what you heard in your third grade Bible class or whatever is the way that it can only be. I think perspectives have opened up, and I'm not saying go with what everybody's teaching. That's not what we're saying, but it's to, be in the Word yourself. Like, jump in, find the good people who you can teach. I think Dave's a great teacher and somebody you can trust when he speaks, but
I don't know everything.
He doesn't know everything. Exactly. So we're all learning a bit.
Yeah. I know we're trying to wind down, but I will say, one of the things that I've had to open my hands about and hold on to stuff. Having belief is important. We should be studying our Bibles, studying church history and theology and all of that.
Right.
But sometimes I think it just is how our minds are wired up, because I've sat down with very dear friends who look at things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
For example, I'm Wesleyan, but I've had some very good Calvinist friends.
Okay.
And they just, there's some things where we just are looking at maybe the same thing on the different side. Right. And, we can't get too hung up on that. We got to go back to the basics of loving others, loving God, and treating others the way that, we would like to be treated ourselves. Some of the basic things that God laid down, and then the other is gonna work it out, and sometimes we can agree to disagree.
Yeah. I think so. Well, where are we going next week, Dave? What's a little preview?
Another great story. We're talking about Lazarus being raised from the dead.
Yeah.
So that's a good one.
And we're kind of coming to the it's to the finish line. We're kind of climbing the mountain right now.
We've been looking at these stories, and it's getting closer to Jerusalem, getting closer to Easter. Jesus will show up in Bethany this week, which is right outside of Jerusalem, and so the cross is coming.
Yep.
Good Friday is coming, but the good thing is that Easter
Sunday
beyond that. So all that is approaching, and we've got some great worship experiences and planned here at Hickory Flat, and hope everyone join us and participate either online or in person. They're all going to be great.
That's right. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. You know where to chat if you want to chat with us, and we'll always enjoy the comments that we see. Like I know a couple weeks ago, we saw one that was requesting that maybe for the 50th, we should have done another hot wings eating challenge. But we didn't. But maybe soon for fun.
Yeah, I'm down.
Oh,
yeah.
We'll get the new sauces.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. We always appreciate you. And you got anything else to add?
No. God bless.
God bless. Y'all take care.
Bye-bye.